joining us for this super special screening for your consideration screening for Gabriela. I'm very excited to be the moderator of tonight's panel discussion. My name is Diana Cadavid, and I'm a programmer for the Toronto International Film Festival. I program the films from Iberoamerica, and I'm director of industry programs for the Latino Film Institute in Los Angeles, and that's where I had the pleasure of meeting Evelyn. But I'll tell you a lot more about it. Tonight's conversation, we have three key people, three people who were crucial in the creation, the writing, the conception, and the making of Gabriela, and also responsible for keeping it alive and who have made it possible for us to be here sharing this space tonight. They are writer and director and also main actress in the film, Evelyn Lorena. Also Vic White, who's a star in the film. Welcome, Vic. And last but not least, Maris Lidaka, who's the producer of the film. During this conversation, we just want to keep your video and your audio off, but once we start the Q&A session, please feel free to turn on your cameras and drop your questions on the chat. So Evelyn Lorena is an actress and a filmmaker and a writer as well. Her production company, Nouvelle Entertainment, has written and produced films that have premiered at different festivals worldwide, including Outfest, Atlanta Film Fest, and the Festival Regard. Evelyn was one of the directing semifinalists for the inaugural Breeze Creators class, sponsored by Michael B. Jordan and his company Outlier Society. Gabriela was made part of the Latino Film Institute's Inclusion Fellowship, where we had the pleasure to meet. And Evelyn was selected to be one of the fellows of this program, where she wrote, directed, acted on Gabriela. And we're so proud to be here tonight because, like the film is now an Oscar qualifying short for the best live action short category. This is fantastic. I am just so excited, Evelyn. Evelyn is also a recipient of the Food Candle and Cocolarious Film Grants and a Screencraft finalist. Then we have Viktor White, who's an electrifying dancer, actor, and social media sensation. He stars in the film. He comes from Ukraine, based in LA, and he's partner on collaborations with companies such as Meta, Revolve, Bibigo, Givenchy, and Zara. And you can catch Vic dancing alongside Anne Hathaway and Nicholas Galitzine as a member of August Moon in Amazon's The Idea of You. He, of course, as I mentioned, is an actor on Gabriela. I hope you all had a chance to see Gabriela before we got here, but if not, after this conversation, you have to make sure to watch it. So thank you, Vic, for joining tonight.
Thank you for having me.
And Maris Lidaka, who's a creative producer and editor. Evelyn and Maris have collaborated for many years. He's a founder behind the Blended Future Project. And through this initiative, he's aimed to amplify diverse voices, cultivate empathy, promote cross-cultural dialogue, and inspire positive change for a more inclusive society on a global scale. He's held key roles producing award-winning media for major companies, including Disney, Warner Bros., AT&T, and Verizon. Thank you, Maris, for being here.
Thank you for having me.
I have to say that I really enjoy the roles that you have in the film, and that we are like, this is gonna, the roles that you did in the film are allowing us to look at the making of it and everything that happened before, during the shoot, and after with the life of the film, from such different angles. So it's pretty cool to have, like from the directing to the acting to the producing of the film. And do you any of you want to say anything just before we start with the questions?
Yeah, I just want to thank everybody who's, here to listen, and anyone who's going to be listening in the post recording. And the film itself was a very personal feat for me, and I am just humbled and so happy that people are enjoying it and it's having this longevity. So thank you so much. I'm really grateful.
Okay. So you just mentioned this, Evelyn, but this is a very personal film for you. Can you tell us about how the journey started, about the writing process, and how the idea came to life?
Yeah. So originally I had seen, I think it was a short film on New York Times that was like a documentary that followed an undocumented worker through his day. And I was so moved by that, where it was not anything with judgment or a stereotype. It was just following him almost like in a really voyeuristic way. And I thought how interesting that could be if we could continue to tell stories of the Latino community with that kind of openness and nuance and humanity. And so I started to work on the script for Gabriela originally as a feature. And I actually pitched it to Morris, and he was very interested. And then somehow it just diluted itself. I felt that it was better told as a short. It became a short. I applied to the fellowship. And then it just developed from there very quickly. But that was the initial impulse. But then I think it became more personal when I started to, well, one, not only infuse stories from and portions from my own emotional life and family life, but then I had to encounter life and death health circumstances. I had just woken up from like a coma and relearning how to walk and all these sorts of things, and having dialysis and all these problems that I was having health wise. And I had restrictions on my freedom in my life. And I really started to contemplate where our own kind of inner personal freedom comes from. And I channeled that into the story as we developed it through the fellowship.
Oh, that's like incredibly powerful. And Marys, how did you get involved with like, when did you come on board, and how was it also for you being part of like this process, so personal and also challenging?
Well, I think Evelyn, you told me in November that you were going to apply for this grant. Like, I don't know if I'm going to get it. I'm going to apply for this grant. And then, I didn't hear back for a little bit, and then I kind of forgot about it. And Evelyn, she contacted me back in December. She was like, "Well, remember that grant that I applied for?" And I was like, "Yeah." She's like, "We got it." I was like, "Oh, that's great. What next?" She's like, "We have to shoot it in like 2 months." I was like, "Oh." And then we had to deliver in June. I was like, "Oh." And I was currently working as an editor kind of full time. So it was a nice little balance of I was holding down my editing job, but also producing this on my off time. This was kind of in the tail end of the pandemic. So I would edit, have a meeting with Evelyn, edit, have a meeting with Evelyn. But to me, I mean, we have been working on this story for, I think, a couple of years. So it was still very important for both of us to make sure that this was done the right way and that we put as much effort as possible we could into making it the best film that we possibly could.
When you say that you had been working on it for 2 years, was like in the, like Evelyn was writing and then you were kind of like,
She was, yeah, she
uh-huh,
was writing. We were, like she said, she was writing it as a feature, and I would take a look at the feature, and then we would kind
uh-huh.
of make notes with each other back and forth. And I think at one point she was like, "You know what? I think I just need to take this and I need to disappear for a while and just work on it." So, which I was like, fair enough. This is kind of the story that's come out of your brain, so take it, disappear for a while, and let's see what happens. Of course, life happened. She ended up having to go to the hospital, health challenges, but she came back and sent me the short, and I was like, "This is really good. What do you want to do with it?" And she was like, "Well, I'm applying for this grant, so we'll see what happens." And then
Mhm.
we were recipients of the grant, and then everything just kind of snowballed from there. I've worked previously as a production manager, so kind of all of that experience had to come back, and I had to channel it all into just how do we make this film as not only as best as possible, but also as efficiently as possible, knowing all the little like tricks and cost-saving measures and all the things that I know how to do in order to get a production like up and running and have it be a smooth operation.
And Vic, how did you came into the project? How did you meet Evelyn and Mary's? And at what point?
I mean, it all kind of started like it always starts with an audition. And this was like very early in my like acting career. This was literally one of the first few auditions that I've ever done, maybe like second or third. I don't know. But I just remember like still kind of figuring out how to do everything, you know, how to send in how to make it look good. And then when I read the script, I was surprised how easy it was. And it felt like cheating because I was like, this doesn't even feel like acting. I feel like the character that I played was just so similar to who I am, I felt like. So I was like, oh, I guess, you know, I'm not even really acting. And then the rest just kind of like worked out to chemistry read, and then you know flying in to the set, and then working with Evelyn, and it was just yeah, that's kind of how it went.
Where did you have to fly? Where was this at?
East Coast,
North
um,
Carolina,
yeah,
Wilmington.
North Carolina,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. It was great out there.
And how were the shooting days? How did
How were
you
the shooting
feel
days?
like with you know like with the cast, especially because like Evelyn was directing and at the same time acting, so I
Hmm.
imagine like it
Yeah.
was like super challenging.
It was honestly like very accommodating, very chill, and I think because of the atmosphere that was there, that like Evelyn and Maris like created, like he said, it was very like efficient. Everything was very efficient, and everything felt put together. So it made my job really easy as somebody who's like new to acting. You know, um, everything. I felt very confident in that environment, and so I think that helped me with my performance, and it helped with overall like you know speed of the production on when I was there at least. Like it all happened really fast and it was just really fun.
It was really fast, I will say.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I guess for like shorts though, like I think we shot in 5 days, right, Morris? So I
Four.
guess
We shot 4 days.
okay.
Mhm.
So relatively, for the length of the short and everything, I think it was a reasonable amount of time, but it did feel very fast. Yeah.
Mhm. I can imagine like intense and fast.
Yeah.
Like I don't know, La Live, like the festival is 5 days long, and like it feels like an entire year went on, and
Yeah.
it's 5 days.
Lalif
And
was
I
so
imagine
fun.
shooting. La Live was fun, yeah.
Yeah, it was really fun. It was my first time going to like you know, anything like of that sort, and just watching other short films. I had so much fun because I came there like just ready to watch the one I'm in, right? And it was crazy
Uh-huh.
to see like what we've worked on the big screen. But I just had a great time watching everybody else as well. I'm like, oh, this is a great time.
I love hearing that. So let's talk about like the themes that the film touches on. Like I was always very connected from like the script to, like this like resilience, but at the same time, a kind of like surrender. And I find that the combination of those two are like like so hard. Those are like the hardest things to balance in life. And I'm sure, like uh from like the more intellectual perspective of like the writing of the film to the acting of the film to the producing the film, when you really yeah, intellectualize the themes, but then there's also everything that you feel about that and how it connects to other aspects of your life and the collective life. Can you just talk about that? How you feel about like the themes that the film touches on from like a personal and intellectual perspective?
Yeah, I mean, again, like this idea of personal freedom and where it comes from. And it's not to diminish, sort of the obstacles that people face or that even Gabriela faces, because, obviously the whole issue of undocumentation is a very complicated situation. But I certainly didn't want to, I feel like when things are hotbeds politically, it's important to sometimes put the human aspect of the story at the forefront so that it can reach a wide variety of people. And so that was one, I think, really important to begin to sort of humanize something that is constantly, I feel, being scapegoated in the media, or if something's going wrong, it's suddenly an immigrant's fault, which is crazy.
Yeah.
Which is, like I said, I know that there's complications there, but it was really important for that aspect to happen. And then once that was sort of part of the story, I wanted to dive in further to what personal freedom meant to her as a character. And I think originally I related a lot to what she initially goes through, because growing up, I always thought, if I become this thing, I'll have what I want, right? I'll be happy if I do this, or if I become more like this, or if I transform myself into this. And I think she has a little bit of that when she's seeking the country club. She's sort of seeking the external validation. And then by the end, I think she begins to have self-validation, or at least begin the journey of that self-validation, and moving to a place where she can value and appreciate herself and empower herself a little bit more, which I think is a really powerful thing, especially when you're talking about the American dream, because the American dream is, pushing through and having that resilience, and meeting your goals, and fulfilling your own destiny. So for me, that was a big thing to sort of counter, just because I don't think you have to necessarily be an immigrant to understand that process. It's a very universal, that process of finding yourself and identity in like an existential way is a very universal thing.
How was it for you, Vic? Does this connect? And even not like then when you made it, but also now in retrospect, how do you feel, like about how it connects with you?
That's a big question, but to connecting with me personally, I can only connect on my experience as somebody who's like moving to a different country from like Ukraine to here, and experiencing that transition, because I lived half my life in Ukraine and I lived half my life here. So I experienced like struggle of transitioning and understanding a new culture, and like, kind of feeling like going against the grain a lot of times, because you either like mold with the culture that you're in, or you stay where you are. So like I can only speak on my personal experience. And I just appreciated seeing like somebody else's side, through this film. And I've never, never, it's like looking through a similar situation. Of course, it's different through somebody else's eyes. So seeing like some similarities, it was just very like, whoa, like that's going on in the world, Like I've experienced it in a certain way, and then seeing somebody else going through something different but similar. So that makes sense.
There is so much transformation, like
Transformation,
in
yeah.
Gabriela's character, that I think it's like you can connect with it.
I think it's very
Like it has,
empowering too.
yeah. And it has like this, like it has like at some points also like the coming of age, but it feels like um you can come of age at any time in your life, at any point in your life, so it's
Well,
like
that was the other thing. I wanted it to feel that universal. And I think part of the reason I wanted it also to feel younger is because I've had these sort of existential questions and identity crises like since I was like 10 years old. I mean, maybe I'm just an old soul, but I always wanted to have more of those kind of complicated stories with things that were maybe within my age range because you're right. Those things don't just happen to, once you're 50 and you're like, oh, I found myself and let's have a movie about it. Like, it's a constant journey and I wanted to reflect that for sure.
And for you, Maris?
Well, I mean, this kind of speaks to, well, not only my own personal experience, but the whole reason why I started the company that I have, the Blended Future Project. It's about exploring these kinds of mixed identities, like people who are on the surface trapped between two worlds, but and trying to find their own self-acceptance. My own personal story, I'm part Black, part Latvian. So I grew up in the United States trying to figure out, okay, am I more Black? Am I more Latvian? Like, where do I fit in? Then I actually moved to Denmark when I was 13 and for the first time became an American and then came back to the US and still trying to figure out my way. So it's the way that it kind of resonates with me is just she's not quite in this country club world. She's not quite in the world of her mom, but she, by the end of the film, finds the place where she's always meant to be, which is if there's some parts of her that are the country club world, that's great. If there's some parts that are her mother's world, that's great. But she ends up becoming her own person. And I think that's kind of the journey that everybody goes through. No matter if it's a cultural thing, an ethnic thing, a racial thing, everybody finds themselves in some place where it's like, I'm not quite sure where I fit in. And at the end of the day, you figure out, well, this is where I am. And I'm okay with maybe not being quite fully in one world or the other.
It's like
And
integrating all the pieces and sort of owning your own culture for yourself. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think is also important when it comes to like different communities that have different cultures because a lot of them get washed away or some of them become invalid or they don't feel like I remember speaking to a lot of my friends where some of them didn't ever feel Latin enough or something. And it's like, well, it's how you claim it and how you own it and how you embody it, so yeah.
I'd love to talk about the water because, like I've watched the film several times and I was just rewatching it like a couple of days ago. And first thing is that always want to just dive right, like I see when you see you swimming, it is just so appealing, there's something so appealing, you just want to jump in the water. But then of course, like with the connection between the opening and the closing, water is as oppressive as it is liberating. It operates in both ways. And I love how it works as a metaphor of everything that we've been talking about, like the same things that can be a catalyst for like your freedom are also a ones for like your oppression, because in the end, it's all about how you find
how you frame
your
it
space with it, how you frame it, how you find the space with it, how you navigate it, how like anything, like that you can possibly do with that. Um, and of course, it was shot beautifully. So do you want to talk about it, like the water for you?
Well, at first I have to give kudos to our cinematographer, Xenia, Patricia. She has such a beautiful, subtle sensibility and she has such an eye for details that I just felt very fortunate that she was able to shoot it the way that I had envisioned it, where she was able to balance, even outside the water scenes, like a sense of grandiose, like sort of a beautiful kind of landscapes and grandiosity, but yet still have that grassroots feel that I really wanted. But in terms of the water, it was tricky because everyone, well, some people, I think if they're in the arts might be able to catch it, but it's actually not real water, right? It's done on a sound stage and The way that the closest sort of film I can compare it to is like the way that they did Shape of Water, because we used similar sort of pulley systems that they did. And then we had a great VFX artist, Keith Webster, out of Chicago, who, composited everything. But in terms of shooting it was pretty seamless with the stunt coordinators and Maris and everybody on set. Although I felt a little ridiculous sometimes because I'm hanging from wires trying to push through gravity that doesn't exist. But we did production designer, Emily Marquet, also really was able to craft sort of the dimension of water. In terms of like the themes of the water, you're right. Like it's as oppressive as it is freeing. And I think by the end, I really wanted to focus on the water as not only a spiritual conductor, but having for Gabriela, but also having the power to liberate. And I think that's just based also on my own personal experiences and my own Indigenous heritage and how important natural elements are in terms of Mayan culture. So I wanted to infuse that in a way that was subtle, but her coming to awakening to it. Yeah.
I mean, I like now that you say it, I feel that the water, like the deep water scenes work because you also are like swimming on the swimming pool, so kind of like the water, like that, the fact that you just see these different bodies of water, the shower, it kind of like just, like connects you in a way that then it doesn't feel so alien, let's say, like the deep watery scenes.
Yeah, and I wanted that sense at the beginning for it to feel almost like an abyss, and then by the end it's this sort of lighter situation where it feels more freeing. But I think with the water, it was also interesting, like you said, the different bodies of water, because I wanted actually the chlorinated water to feel more limiting. You know what I mean? Because it's kind of like the fake water. It's the water that the external validation that she's seeking from the pool. And so it was this combination of how do we frame that in a certain way? And then, like I said, she had a really good idea when we were at the pool about framing it really closely. So I think that looks really cool. Yeah, I think it was, a lot of it was also intuitive the way that we shot it, because I guess that's just the way her and I both work, and we had like a really good understanding of each other. So that I have to kind of split the credit on that.
That's awesome, because that's the best, because I mean, like, like I know we're always talking about like how this is so collaborative.
100. We had to go through a couple of cinematographers, for scheduling issues, and then the other one, he was one of the most talented cinematographers I had ever encountered, but we didn't see the film the same way. So we couldn't, do you know what I mean? And so it's so important, I think, to have the same sensibility. And that was another part of the film that I told Marius, like we had all the heads of department, we had meetings where I talked about how I wanted the film to feel meditative. And even in the work approach and the culture of the film, I wanted it to feel meditative. And so that was really important to me.
And the mother-daughter relationship, like that exploration, I also found like very interesting. There's so much silence, which I love so much, I guess, in this same meditative quality that you're talking about. Do you want to talk a little bit about like that evolution of that relationship, both from like the writing and then when you were shooting?
Yeah, I think that there was a lot of threads between my personal life, like certain things that she says, certain things that I had pulled, kind of directly from my own parents. And it was a mixture of my father and my mother into one character sometimes. But as the story went along, I really wanted her to represent culture for Gabriela, not only the obstacle in the immediate sense, because the mother's like pushing against it, like the practical versus the ideal, I guess. But by the end, I wanted it to almost feel like she's reconnecting with culture as well through the mother. And that was a really important sort of relationship to me because it's not just about finding the love, but it's what she represents, like the love that was crafted by the ancestors almost, you know. Um, and at the end, when they have that shot at the beach and it's both the mother and her holding, it almost feels like that visually speaks to the generational reconciliation, you know. And I didn't have to say anything, it was just that visual, or at least I'm hoping that that's what it communicates. Yeah.
It feels like it's un polo a tierra. I don't know how to say that in English, you know, like, but like what grounds you in
Oh
many
yeah.
ways, you know. And I mean,
Oh, lo
of
que te
course,
pone en
this
la
is also
tierra. Yeah. Yeah.
exacto lo que te pone en la tierra, lo que te conecta, yeah, whatever like really holds you to the ground. And of course, you know, like like everybody like we all read film and these relationships through our own personal experiences, you know. So of course for me it also comes very connected to my mother and the way she also does that thing, which is just like sometimes way too much, but that like yeah, like kind of like putting your foot on the ground.
And as
So,
much as I've struggled with my own sort of like clashes that I've had
mhm.
with my own like parents, I think one of the beautiful things that I value now is that they do provide that sense of groundedness. Like if I ever think I'm getting too much my head in the clouds, trust and believe that my parents are going to be like knocking me off the horse, you know, which is something that I appreciate. And I wanted her to have that quality as well as a parent in the film.
I think we're gonna I wanna ask like just one more question and then we can open it to audience questions. I don't know, for some people who are, I see different names, so you are free now to turn on your cameras if you want to and just kind of like join the conversation. And while we get to oh hi.
Hi. And yeah, awesome work. Really beautiful film. I was wondering, I had a couple questions, but I'll start with what it was like to direct yourself. Yeah.
Um, I I get asked that question a lot, and I actually don't know the answer in the sense of I don't know how if I actually like directed myself as much as prepared. And like you know, my background is obviously as an actor, and the way that I prepared directing wise was the same way, but just more intensively in the pre-production. And then a lot of the sort of technical things I would have to relegate to Morris on the day of, hey, we need this to happen, and then he would execute some of those technical production things. And he, you know, like he mentioned earlier, he's really great at, you know, maneuvering the production. So that was really helpful. But yeah, I think I approached it mostly as like, in terms of directing myself, just as an actor and making sure I was really prepared to be able to just be intuitive and free on the day, which, as you know, as from acting as well, you have to put in a lot of that preparation in the before you're on set.
Yeah. Did you rely on playback?
For some things. And then other things, like I said, it was very intuitive where I just was like, we have to just keep moving and trust that it's there. Mostly for time restraints, to be honest, because our locations, we had to just move so fast.
Right.
Yeah, but I also trust like I said, having Morris there was really like crucial because I trusted that if we got it, he would tell me if something was like if I missed it, you know what I mean? Um, but I don't, yeah, and we've worked together, and like I said, because we prepped so much in the pre-production, I didn't feel that we were gonna necessarily, and that's a luxury because you can have so many things go wrong on the day. So we were really lucky in that regard, I think.
And I guess I can chime in on that technical side. I Quick story, my first job as a production manager was working on a production where we went to 25 locations in 5 days. So with that experience, this was kind of like a cakewalk a little bit. I mean, there were still challenges, but it was like, well, it's not that, so I know we can get through this. So it's just a kind of a matter of, okay, if this happens, it's all about kind of planning what you want to do and then having reserved plans for when everything doesn't work out. So it's kind of like we have plan A. If plan A doesn't work out, we have plan B, and if plan B doesn't, and you just kind of go so on and so forth. But just always thinking of what if this doesn't work or that happens, then we're going to do this, and just having an answer to anything that comes our way production wise.
There was also, I think, between the actors, we had plenty of rehearsal time prior to shooting. So like, for example, Viktor and I had like a whole day of rehearsals for our stuff. I had a whole day with Maria, the other actress, the mother. So I tried to put that in because you don't often get rehearsal time sometimes with film. And so that I tried to really make sure that that was a part of the process.
Thank you.
Hey, yeah, beautiful and heartbreaking film. Thank you so much for making it. I was wondering like a little bit about your writing process. So I know you said you shot in 4 days. You guys had 2 months to put it together, but before that, could you talk a little bit about like how long you've been working on the script or mulling it around and outline that kind of thing?
Sure. So I should preface that like what was in the script to what came in the film, I think half of it was chopped. And I'll get a little more into that. But I would say that so let's see, I think I started writing it in the middle of the pandemic. And then that I ended up doing, it was like a 75-page sort of feature situation. And then we nixed it, where I took some time off, like Mara said, and I just started throwing stuff on the wall. Like I would just start writing random scenes that would come to me where I was like, oh, wouldn't it be interesting if they're making tamales one day? Oh, wouldn't it be interesting if it was just all silent and there's no dialogue? So I wrote the whole thing with no dialogue. Then, what if it was just more romantic and it was just that one storyline through the whole film, and just trying different things until, some of those scenes piece together the short. And it was the one that like I submitted to the fellowship. And then as the process of that script got mentored through the fellowship, the original rough cut that we screened at La Life was actually closer to 30 minutes. And then that process of editing and creating the final film, that was a whole other writing process. I even though I'm not physically writing it, you're sort of writing the film over again. So that was a whole other process. And it, I think it was about really distilling, what is this about? Like that was the most important, I think, was what is this about? What is this about? And the more that became, oh, it's about self-acceptance. Oh, it's about self, and that theme occurred more and more. It made it easier to sort of cut down the film and craft sort of the story.
Especially, does anybody have any other? Okay.
Hi.
My niece just like completely
Okay, my
oblivious
brother
of
just
what's
walked in.
happening here. Completely oblivious. No, Linda. No, Linda. No. Sorry. Does anybody else have questions? Sorry.
Thank you for that question, by the way. Thank you.
So do you want to tell us a little bit about of what you're doing right now?
We're also doing a lot of like behind the scenes vignettes that we're about to start releasing. We just released one where There's a conversation between all my family members and how it influenced the film and how their experiences are. So if you want to see that, that's also online. We're going to do different interviews and things that are being released, like between like Xenia and Maris and other people from the film that talk about how they were involved in the film. And I would talk to Maris about this, where I wanted it to feel like a homegrown effort about the film as well. Like I wanted to show how everybody's talent sort of contributed to this and how everybody connected to the film. Because again, it's really important for me to have it feel like it's a universal story. And I've been pleasantly surprised, like going to festivals or even having reviewers look at the film. And a lot of the response, I originally thought that the response was going to be that all the women would just respond or something, but it's actually been a lot of men, like a lot of men after screenings or at festivals, and just saying how much they related to it. And I thought that was really cool. Like it really was moving to me because it was unexpected. So
That's super cool. Make sure to pass the word around so more people
yeah,
go and watch the film. I think that this is like such an important time, like in the year, and it's so special that the film is going through this live because it's such an important push for more people to see it and for the stories to, like to get to more audiences that get these other ways of being seen, the more people see them.
yeah, thankfully, like we're on so many different platforms now. So obviously we're on the Academy screening room and all of that, but we're on so many different platforms like on Leto and Film Shortage, and we're on the Oscar short what is it, the
For your consideration, Vimeo
yeah,
playlist.
so yeah, we're on all kinds of stuff. We're on the Smithsonian through the end of the month, so you can go on the Smithsonian and look at it. And yeah, we're just really fortunate that it's resonating with audiences, and like you said, it's an important, I think, film now for what's going on in the greater scheme, of like what's going on in the world, and bringing that humanity to things that are very easily sort of scapegoating in society, and or seen as like a second class citizen. And so that's really important for me that it's amplifying the Latino community in a positive way.
What were some of your
that's really great.
favorite? Oh, I'm sorry. Somebody has their hand up.
Go ahead, Nana.
I don't think you talked about this, about fundraising, or how you went about getting money for the film. Was it something that you wrote? I mean, you talked a little bit about some grants you received, but was that the majority of how you raised money?
It was actually, thankfully, like, as Diana mentioned at the beginning, we were the recipients of Foot Candle Film Grant, which they give quite a bit of money to North Carolina filmmakers, the Filmed in NC grant, which they also give a lot to if it's a North Carolina based production. Screencraft, we had obviously the fellowship through La Leaf, and we just kind of got oddly, fortunate with that. It is a lot of work. These grants, a lot of them require a lot. But I think the thing that was in our favor was that Maris and I worked really hard to distill the story. And I think that that's what makes it, when it's really distilled and focused, it makes it easier, I think, for the grant people to look through it. I mean, I guess Diana, you can speak more through that because you guys took the film. So I don't know exactly sometimes what people are looking for, but Maris and I did try to distill the story as much as possible. But yeah, to answer your question, yeah, a majority was from those grants, which I know how hard it is to like fundraise, because there's so many different ways to allocate funds for independent film these days. There's obviously crowdfunding and all kinds of things, but yeah, thankfully we got it through that.
Did you have any favorite festival experiences with this film?
On my end, La Leaf obviously was amazing. The caliber of films there, and they're also Oscar qualifying festival now too, which is great. I would say my other favorite probably was Festival Regard. It was I got to go in Canada, although it was -5. So it was very cold. But it was an amazing festival, and the resources that they provide the filmmakers was fantastic. The quality of films was fantastic. We were just really lucky to be part of that. We were a part of the Indigenous perspectives, and that was great.
Just
Leaf
before
is
we
also my
go,
favorite festival, by the way.
yeah.
I really, I think I went not only our night, but I went a couple of other days and just really had an amazing time at La Leaf.
Yeah, La Leaf's great.
Yeah, coming back May 28th to June 1st. Okay. You guys are so talented. Thank you so much for taking the time to like do this conversation. Evelyn, I'm so grateful to have met you. And I think Gabriela is a very special film, and I'm so happy that it's going around, and the more people that see it, the better. So thank you all of you who joined, and please share the word. Thank you, Stephanie, for putting it together, and best of luck to all of you, and of course to Evelyn and Gabriela.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everybody.
Congratulations.